Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Girlies Who Get It podcast. I am your host, Alonna Elaine, and I am so excited to dive deep into these subjects with you. So today, this is episode 1, and we're getting into how to transform the last 6 months of 2024 to feel like you are living your life from a space of alignment, feeling more connected with your purpose and the things that you want to achieve, and not feel guilty for the cycles that we naturally want to go through, points in which we press the pause button or reset or start over, whatever it looks like for you, not feeling guilt or shame for that journey. So the purpose behind the Girlies Who Get It podcast is really to share my space with other women who are truly in alignment with this journeying forward, this sort of radical self-awareness, emotional depth journey that I am personally on, and wanting to find and align and connect with other women who see themselves in that space as well. This really is kind of like an open diary feel. I'm just speaking currently right now in my closet. From the heart without feeling like I need to do anything other than show up as authentically as I desire to. So I hope that this finds you well, and the people who are meant to find it, that they do, and you feel very connected. So diving into the first of 3 steps for transforming the rest of your 2024 is to move in silence. It's kind of one of those cliche, always heard, repeated everywhere tips, but it really is so important. And I want to give you a different perspective of how to move in silence, because sometimes we think of it as don't tell anybody because there's fear behind it, there's anxiety behind it. That gives you a skewed perspective of your support system, finding people in your support system, feeling like you aren't able to share your space or your triumphs with people because you're afraid of what they're going to do or say. So the perspective that we're coming from today is, yes, there are definitely people who just hate on you just because you're pretty or you're smart, or they feel intimidated by the way that you desire to show up for yourself. But there's also a different lens that we can view this from, so that we don't feel so much so as if showing up means that every single time we desire to do that, somebody is going to tell us that we shouldn't, or they're hating on us or trying to sabotage it from behind. But I want to give you the perspective of what happens when people have so much anxiety in their own lives that they project that onto you, or they have this competitive mindset where if you show up, the resources available for them are going to be diminished or dwindled because your way of showing up is so natural, so authentic, so in alignment that things just seem to happen for you and not for them. And what happens when people like that are operating in our space is that we can feel as if we need to sort of quiet ourselves or dim our own light. And that is especially hard when these people are in your own family. And what happens when we have a mother like this, or we have a sister like this, or we have cousins, brothers, aunts, uncles, your father, whoever it is in your life that makes you feel like showing up hurts their feelings. What you can do to see that from a different perspective. We move in silence, not in a sense of needing to protect ourselves as if we are going to be attacked every time we come out. It's recognizing that when you're constantly saying to someone, hey, this is what I'm doing, even if you're coming from a perspective of being excited about your goals and your journey and how far you've come, sometimes people see that as you asking for their approval, you desiring to see what they think about your journey and what they want, what you want from them in return for telling them about your journey. And I will tell you, as somebody who had to learn this lesson a few times over, which is why I'm sharing it with you as my first tip, is that I have encountered people who are so insecure with their mediocrity that they feel genuinely threatened by the idea that I have talents that they don't have. Like it's not on the scoreboard for them, and it is mind-blowing for them how it can naturally flow for me. Now, what some people don't recognize is that when you decide to understand yourself on a deeper level, like we're not just talking about surface level, it's cute to doggy paddle on the surface. We're talking about you have unpacked your traumas. You have done a lot of self-reflecting at different stages throughout your life. And you ask yourself those tough questions. Why am I doing this? Why am I saying this? Why do I feel that this is aligned with me? Why do I feel like this isn't? Where am I holding on to limiting beliefs, and where am I deciding that I shouldn't be bigger in this moment? What happens is that you discover yourself on such a deep level that you recognize that anything that you want to be, anything you desire for yourself, you truly can achieve it. And it's not even from this false sense of security or confidence in yourself on a physical level. For me, this is on a deep soul level. This is me working out that my inner being desires something more potent, more powerful than even my human self can grasp sometimes. And that means getting a little bit uncomfortable with the space that pushes me forward and makes me more seen, more heard in an area or an arena with people who typically try to stop me in those moments. So when I decided I had to start moving in silence, it really wasn't from a perspective of, I'm so afraid of what they're going to say. It was recognizing that these people felt like we're all on the starting line together, and you have to show up and tell us what you're doing in order for us to move accordingly around what you're doing and saying. And I noticed when I was younger and like during my sort of emerging adulthood years, I really didn't feel like I needed to explain myself to people. I wasn't even focused. I was not outwardly focused. I was not worrying about what they thought, how they thought. I genuinely thought we were all in our own lane, living our own life, doing what we wanted to or needed to. And when I kind of popped my head up, that's when I started to realize that there were so many people in their mind in competition with me. And it made them feel very uncomfortable in their body that I was showing up in the way that I was. So much so that they were telling people that I'm secretive, or I'm always doing something behind somebody's back, or I'm this or I'm that. And really what happens is that these people started to believe that they can control the narrative because I'm not saying anything. I'm not interested in talking or defending myself. There had to come a point in my journey when I did have to address these people. So I want you to understand that moving in silence doesn't mean that you're not standing up for yourself or you're not proud of yourself or your accomplishments. It's recognizing that sometimes the audience that you're speaking to is not capable of receiving the message or the energy of the message that you have. Sometimes these people genuinely are stuck in lower levels of development, and that means emotionally immature, mentally immature. The way that they see life, their perspective is just not fully developed. That is okay, but it doesn't mean we have to stay in that space with them too. So when you move in silence, you're recognizing that there's a point in your life where it doesn't feel comfortable anymore to share these things with certain people, where you recognize that the outside noise sometimes distracts you from what you're genuinely aligned with, what you genuinely want for yourself, especially when certain things on a societal level are more so commercially accepted, and the things that you desire for yourself are kind of in the outlier energy field where it's not really the traditional path. And maybe it is, like say you want to go to school, that's traditional, right? But what if you want to do that and in your family there aren't a lot of people who have done that before, or no one has? I mean, that's a wild perspective as well when you're the first person in your family to do something. I am a first generation college graduate. The way that that was received, you would not know it. I mean, and this is unfortunately what happens sometimes in families in which there's that one person who's pushing forward and doing it a little bit differently, even if it's traditional. But if it's not traditional for your family, that can feel very uncomfortable and very disorienting when you're that first person to do it, and the way it's received is kind of like, why are you trying to show off energy, not wow, that's really dope, you're pushing our generation forward. I mean, I truly went back to school, one, for myself and what I wanted to do, but also because I have children, and I want my children to know that the bar isn't set on the ground. And it's not in the sense that if you don't have a college education, there's something wrong with you or you're not good enough. That's never the perspective. But I know how it feels when your kids want to look to you and say, I'm afraid of taking that next step. So what did my parents do? And yeah, you're telling me I should go to college, but you didn't. So now I'm not going to. I don't want for my own fears or limitations to be the reason my children feel that they can't push themselves forward. I want them to see mommy did it, daddy did it, therefore I can too. And so it's bigger than myself. And even though I was the first one in my family lineage to do it, I don't want to be the only one with my children move forward. So to tie that up, the biggest thing when people are operating from a space of fear or anxiety, and we're not just talking about the haters, we're shifting from that narrative. When those people are operating from fear and anxiety, they literally are worried constantly to the point where their thoughts are not rational. And you come along and they're in their mind thinking they have to compete with you, otherwise the world is going to come crashing down. And so when you decide to move in silence, it's really a promise to yourself. It's honoring yourself and saying that I am enough, and my validation for the things that I desire for myself is enough. I don't have to explain that to anybody else. Even if I'm not asking permission, if they perceive it that way, I'm going to keep it to myself. And that way, when you do navigate past that space, you graduate past that space, what comes is so solid and rooted in a strong foundation that even if they had an opinion that differed from yours and it was negative, you don't even feel it. It literally just like water off of a duck's back. It just doesn't touch you. The second tip that I have for you is to make room for your dreams. So this one is kind of like in that space of when you're manifesting something, or you have a vision board, or you have a goal, you have things that you want to work towards. What in your life needs to move or be shifted in order to make room for the blessings that you're asking for? And one of the things that I didn't realize that this was the way that I thought or operated. It was just so second nature for me until I started to really step back and think, whoa, like my life is exactly, if I had been creating a vision board, I have received all of those things. And what was it that I did? And for me, one of the biggest things was making room for the things I was asking for. So when I started to invite luxury into my life, for me, that meant that when I went on vacation with my girlfriends, I wasn't staying in some raggedy, taggedy, crazy, unsafe location. I was going to a nice place. I was filling my own cup in a way that felt good for me at that space in my life. I also had just bought a house at that time, and I had an idea of what kind of bed I wanted. And the bed that I wanted was a king size bed, and I was single at the time. But for me, I knew also that I desired to have a husband, a partner, somebody in my life. And I didn't get a twin size or queen size bed. And I'm not saying like you have to get a king size bed if you're married or you have a partner or whatever it is. But the idea was that there was room on the other side of that bed for somebody who I wanted to welcome into my life. The other thing, when I decided to write down like what I wanted and was looking for in a partner, the biggest things for me was not money. It was how this person would see me, treat me, what it would feel like to be in their presence, in their energy, how I would feel within my own body, within my own space with somebody else in that space with me. What I really wanted as far as communication or just the loving energy that I received from this person. But the biggest thing was that I started with providing for myself. I started with loving myself. I started with gifting things to myself, seeing myself as worthy, as loving. And then when my husband came along, I'm not joking, I felt like I didn't know what I was looking for. So I actually asked for help. I prayed for help. I had a conversation with God and was just like, look, I don't know what I'm doing and I need some help. The reason why I asked for that was because my idea of love was skewed. I didn't grow up in a family system. Although my father was loving and he provided for our family, I didn't have a mother who was welcoming or receiving of that love. I also didn't have a mother who was welcoming or receiving the love of her children, right? So this skewed toxic family dynamic is what I was then going out into the world and using as a benchmark for my relationships, my friendships, which is why a lot of them were subpar, like they were trash. And that is me being honest with myself. And I was the same role I played in my family system was the same role I was playing in these relationships. I was overly giving, overly extending, and not receiving a damn thing back. And for me, when I decided that I wanted love in my life, I was very clear. Like, these boundaries, baby, no ma'am. You are not stepping over them. If I see a pinky toe out of line, I'm going to flick your behind away like a damn bug. And that is something I had to get clear with for myself, to myself. And it started with me inviting luxury into my life. It started with me saying, I don't need an occasion to dress up and look nice. I don't need a man to do that. I can do that for myself. If I decide I want to show up or explore my own desires, my own interests, how I style my hair, how I dress, what I wear on my body, that's for me. So by the time my husband came along and I asked for help and I met him, when I tell you the feeling of meeting my husband was so strange to me, and I actually had to sit down and ask God, like, what is this feeling? I'm not sure what is moving through my body, the energy. I like it, but I don't understand it. And I realized it was peace. When I was in his presence, I felt comfortable. I felt relaxed. I felt like I was safe. I listened to him. I could talk to him. He listened to me. And the conversation was so energetically vibrating at a higher level that it was eye-opening. And I'm not saying that the only relationships or connections that you can have that are on that level is with a man. I'm saying that if that is what you desire, right? It could be that you desire friendships, female-centered friendships. What is the benchmark that you decide? What are the parameters that you decide is how a relationship with another woman, a friendship with a man, what it should look like? And if that is skewed, my darling, you have to start there. You have to say to yourself, where did I get this? Why do I think this is normal? And I think one of the biggest things for me was that society definitely pushes this idea of daddy issues. It pushes this idea that we all got problems with our daddies and we got to unpack that because your daddy wasn't around, he left you, and we think our abandonment issues come from that. But there are plenty of women, I've seen it online, where they're sharing their stories where the relationship with their mother is actually the root cause of a lot of traumas or their skewed views of life and relationships and themselves. And think about it. If you're raised by a woman who is insecure and doesn't like herself, guess what she's going to do? She is going to pass that down like a family heirloom, and you are going to carry it forward. And if you don't think clearly about why you feel this way, and this is not even from a place of hatred or judgment, it's being honest with yourself. There are plenty of women, unfortunately, who do operate from a space of fear, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And when they raise their children, there's a short window of time where your child is all about you and only about you. It's like from 0 to maybe 5. And after that point, they start to think for themselves, operate for themselves. And then there's a discomfort that a lot of women have where their daughters are going to be the people they're competing with. And I've seen it on so many levels. I've seen it where when I drop my kids off to school and there are mothers who I genuinely could not tell that their daughter was a girl because they were dressed like a boy, their hair was like a boy, and I was too uncomfortable with saying that they were pretty because I thought I might get that wrong. That could be a pretty little boy. And I've seen that same family where that little girl looked like a boy. The son, he saw my husband giving one of our sons a hug and a kiss and telling him goodbye. And my son is in TK. And this little boy was like, "Why are you hugging him? He's a boy. Boys don't get hugs. Boys don't get kisses. They don't need that." And that little boy was in kindergarten. Okay. And this is when we are grown adults and we're looking around at the dating pool, whether it's a man or a woman you're interested in, and you say to yourself, why are they emotionally detached? How come I cannot communicate with them? What is going on? This is what's happening. It's how we're raised. It's what we see as the normal script for a man or for a woman, and we take that in. And we internalize that and we say this is what's normal. It's what our parents do. It's what our siblings do. It's what our family structures and family systems do. And if you go out into the world and you're curious and you're open-minded and you're willing to embrace something different than what you were raised on, you might have a chance of seeing something differently and saying, you know what? I want to embrace that. But there comes a point where you're going to need help to allow yourself to embody that energy and really live in it. And it could be that the people you surround yourself with are the people that help you. For me, it's a higher power other than myself because I needed help to stop in the moment, to slow down, to rewrite these neural pathways that say this is the way you're supposed to do it. This is the way somebody's supposed to treat you. This is the way you're supposed to say this. This is the way you're supposed to do that. And I had to say to myself, I might have it wrong. I might not know what I'm doing, and I'm going to need a little bit of help. And for you, wherever you're unpacking that stuff, that is making room for your dreams. That is making room for the love that you wish to receive. That is making room for the children that you wish to have, the job you wish to have, the travels you wish to have, the writing that you wish to express, the artistic creativity you wish to embody. Whatever it is, you have to make room for it. That could be as simple as you want to draw and paint, but you have never bought the supplies necessary to do that. You have never taken the classes necessary. You're not willing to ask the right questions because you're afraid of looking stupid. There are so many people, and myself included. One thing that I always find very fascinating is when I listen to people and they say a word wrong and they're immediately embarrassed or uncomfortable. For me, I have to see a word, and sometimes I need to hear it said in order for me to recognize how that word is broken down. If you're uncomfortable because you were raised in a space, in an environment where you weren't exposed to language like that, you weren't exposed to words like that, so you avoid those words. You won't say them because you don't want to look stupid. There is never any reason why you should feel that way about yourself or about your journey, because the beautiful part of our journey is the expansion. And the expansion comes from walking your behind out into the dark sometimes with only your little match to light the way, because your family never took this path, because the people in your life, the women in your life are uncomfortable. There are so many of us that are stuck in the family lineage system and we don't even know it. So for you to ask the questions is you making room for the things that you desire, and that includes your dreams. That includes the things that would light your soul up, that would help you step into full alignment. And the beauty of that is that you would inspire people who are meant to hear your message. As someone who literally was told at one of my jobs that I needed to at least say 10 words before I left, you could not tell me I was going to be doing a podcast. Like, podcast? Whose podcast? Not me, because I was too uncomfortable. And for me, when I unpacked that, it was the fact that in my home life, when I would say something, I'm shut down. It was the fact that the people around me were so uncomfortable with me shining or me having something that I started to shrink myself. I started to feel like, oh, she's uncomfortable with me being beautiful, so let me just constantly pour into her. Let me try not to show up like this because it'll make her feel uncomfortable. Fuck her. That's what you need to say. It doesn't matter how somebody else feels about you, because if God or whatever you believe in, that higher power, put you on this earth to give your perspective, and you waste that gift because you're afraid of that person feeling a certain way because you got a little extra sauce in your meal, that's on them. That has nothing to do with you. The last and final tip that I have for you is to build systems from habits. One of the things that I learned in discovering that I was a little bit neurodivergent, that the way that my brain worked, the way that I saw the world was a little bit differently, a little bit spicy, a little bit extra, but more importantly, very important. I learned that I needed a little bit of help with the systems or things in my life that I wanted to do in order to be successful. And the best thing was to learn from people who had already done it, learning from other women who were in a space that I desired to be in, allowing myself to be embraced in the friendships that I was previously uncomfortable with or didn't know were possible. These were things that helped me build systems for my success. So, again, this kind of ties back into the making room for your dreams because we're asking questions. We're not afraid to ask questions or to learn from people who have already traveled that path. One of the biggest things, though, that I want you to hear me if you hear nothing else is to see yourself in the faces of people who don't look like you, whether that is age, whether that is race, their background, the country they grew up in, the languages they speak, the jobs that they have, the education path that they took, whatever it is, allow yourself to see yourself in those faces. Because as a Black woman, one of the biggest things that we sometimes struggle with is feeling like that's for them, but not for us. That is a lie. And it is a falsehood that sometimes we are believing in that is not necessary, right? I grew up, again, my home life was different, potentially from yours. And my father was very big on telling us that we could be whatever we wanted. He never, ever emphasized that your race would hold you back. I never felt like being Black was a problem until I met very ignorant people. And that includes women, and that is definitely including men. And for me, I didn't see that as a limiting factor for myself. But if you came up where that was constantly pushed in your face, whether it was by your family or the people in your environment, then that's where you need to start, because that is going to stop you from seeing yourself clearly. Is if you don't see other people who look like you. And sometimes one of the biggest things is where we come from, right? I also grew up in a home life, in a family system where my father was in the military. So we traveled a lot. But more importantly, here's what's funny is sometimes we associate being in the military with, traveling and being embraced or immersed in different cultures. But it was actually my father's upbringing. He grew up in New York, and it's a mixing pot, melting pot, and he had different cultures. He dated women from different backgrounds, spoke different languages, ate different foods. So when we grew up, he was really big into showing us in different kinds of cultures and foods and languages and family systems and celebrations. So for me, that was normal. It wasn't weird to try other people's food. Like currently to this day, we had a neighbor who was Filipino and white, and her mother was Filipino, and she used to make sinigang. My favorite is my favorite. And I still to this day make that recipe. I asked her later on when I was an adult if she could share the recipe with me, and I still make it. It is one of my favorite comfort foods. But if you grew up in a family system or a neighborhood or a city where that is weird, it is strange for you, that's considered white people food, right? You've ever heard that before? Then you might feel like it is weird for you to want to try an acai bowl or for you to have a salad. Like that could be strange in your family system. And so being okay with saying, I might not know what this can look like for me. One of my favorite things to do is to see Black women in luxury spaces, to see Black women in corporate, to see Black women, even when I graduated with my psychology degree, to see other Black women in there graduating in general. I got excited. It was so exciting for me to be in that space, especially because mental health is something that is very near and dear to my heart. So when I see in the real world the lack of representation for women like us and what that does to women like us, I want to add to that space. I want to be one of those people that says, if you need someone, a provider who looks like you, and that makes you feel safe, I want to be that person. And that's why for me, it's important, right? But when I'm on my journey and there aren't a lot of women who look like me, I feel comfortable leaning on women who don't look like me and asking for help, sharing that I need something, I need help, I'm curious about this. Do you know about that? And a lot of times for us, our systems, our support networks are limited because we're trying to find only those who look like us. Unfortunately, if you're someone who says, I want to only be with people who look like me, I want to only connect with people who look like me, I have no idea what they experience, their traumas, the reason why they feel limited, the reason why they feel like they're not good enough. If someone feels uncomfortable with you showing up vibrant in that space because of what you experience, then your ability to connect to them, it's like you're on a different station, like a different frequency. They're not on the same frequency as you. It doesn't mean it's lower or it's not better or yours is better or theirs is better. It just means it's different. Don't limit yourself because you want to be in a certain space, but those people don't look like you. They don't sound like you, or they won't get what you're trying to say. Trust that your ability to show up, that you're right to be in that space, that you'll be embraced, that it will matter, that it will be important, that what you have to say, what you have to add to, that it will be received in the way that it's meant to. The last thing that I want to leave you with in this building systems from habits is that you're not stupid. And you're not someone who isn't smart enough to be here. You're not dumb. You're not incapable. Sometimes it's just that we haven't been taught yet. We haven't been taught by either the people in our lives or the path that we traveled down while we were trying to hide ourselves. We were hanging out with people who couldn't ever in their wildest dreams get us. And you just needed to change the environment. One of my favorite phrases, I don't know where I got it from, but I love saying it, and I might have made it up, is that you are a big fish in a puddle. Sometimes you just need to get yourself out of those denser, smaller spaces and into spaces that are bigger and more receptive to your energy. And that doesn't mean you're not good enough or you're going to be left behind. It could just mean that you're trying to fit yourself into places and spaces and around people who just are not in alignment with you. There's nothing to be ashamed of. All right. That is the end of episode 1, the first of many to come in the Girlies Who Get It podcast. I am so excited. I hope that you got something from this. I hope that it felt like we connected, like it was a real girl chat on the phone, you and I. And you felt very seen. And I'd love to hear from you. I don't know how this works. It's my first one. So I don't know if there can be comments below. Maybe there can't. But yes, I hope you have a lovely day. And I'll see you in the next one.